In these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger LIVECAST.
Good afternoon, Amsterdam, and good afternoon, Moscow. Welcome to the fourth livecast of Infected Cities. These series are created by DutchCulture and Pakhuis de Zwijger. And my name is Zoe Papaikonomou. I am your host today. In this weekly series, we will focus on different cities throughout the world that have been hit by corona crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has an enormous impact worldwide, of course, on vital areas of our lives, but this program will specifically zoom in on the cultural sector and on the question how cultural professionals are looking for creative and social solutions for the current pandemic. And today we will talk about the impact of coronavirus on Moscow. We will talk about how the pandemic is currently impacting cultural organizations, society, and artists. So first, some general remarks for our audience. We have a very informative program filled with many interesting guests zooming in from Moscow, but I also have a very nice guest sitting next to me in Pakhuis de Zwijger. Stef Vase, welcome.
Thank you.
So audience, also thank you very much for joining us via live stream or the Pakhuis de Zwijger website or Facebook. So it's always possible to ask questions, and you can do this via Zoom. So if you are in Zoom, go to or the chat option, but this is for visitors amongst each other. But we also have a Q&A. So if you have a question for our guests, please go to the Q&A and I will do my best to ask as many questions for you throughout the program. Then it's time for some background information on Moscow. So the metropolitan area of Moscow has over 2.5 million inhabitants. And if we look at the corona numbers of today, we see that the official numbers are that there are almost 175,000 detected cases and around 2,300 people have passed away of COVID-19. This also makes Russia a country with one of the most largest number of infections in the world. So it's time to invite the first two guests into the program. We will start with a conversation about the current situation in Moscow. And then we will talk with two very interesting speakers that have very beautiful art projects. And we will end with a discussion about the effects of corona on the arts and culture sector in Moscow. So I already said Stef Vase is sitting next to me in Pakhuis de Zwijger. Dutch viewers will know her also as the former correspondent of the NOS in Indonesia. From 2006 she was correspondent of Al Jazeera, and now just since last year she is correspondent of Al Jazeera in Russia, in Moscow. Thank you for being here. Also joining in from Zoom is Sergei Panomarev, a photojournalist. Sergei, welcome. So my first question is for you. Hello. So could you describe the current situation in the city? How do the streets look? What are the measures in Moscow at the moment?
Well, right now the situation is easing and authorities are lifting up the lockdown measures. We would say that the number of healed cases are growing and they are slightly higher than the confirmed cases. So I would say that the cure cases are about 3,800 and new detected cases are about 2,000. Also, Moscow has a very low rate of deaths. Right now, this week we recorded the first traffic jams since the beginning of the lockdown, and the situation, I think, is getting to normal. We already discussed with our colleagues when the museums and the theaters might be open.
So, and can you explain how did the measures start? Because in February, slowly there were cases detected in Moscow. When did the city start the lockdown, and with what kind of measures?
Well, the first measures of Moscow lockdown were announced about 17th of March. But, you know, Russia is neighboring China, and during the first breakout of coronavirus in China, Russia closed the borders in January and in February, and it was also evacuating citizens to Siberian towns. But there was no kind of outbreak during that time. The outbreak came when people started to come back to Moscow after March holidays, and it was around March 8th. And nearly at that time, Moscow recorded the first spike of numbers of coronavirus cases. So,
and how did the Moscow inhabitants reacted to the measures? Did they immediately stay home? Had people doubts about the measures, or?
Well, there was quite a lot of discussions, but you know, honestly, I think that most of Muscovites were preferred to stay at home, and they found their way to work from home. And the city authorities, they installed the system of digital passes, which worked with some mistakes. It actually worked, but at the beginning of this implementation of this digital pass system, there was some traffic jams that probably spread the virus as well.
So, Step Vase, so you are the Russia correspondent for Al Jazeera, but you are here in Amsterdam. Can you explain how that
Biting my
happened?
nails, yes. I'm sort of stranded here now. I had basically 1 hour to decide where I'm going to spend the next month when I was still in Moscow late March. This all happened very fast. As Sergei says, there were only few cases, actually, much less in Russia than in other parts of the world, especially compared to Europe or China initially. So it seemed like the government thought that everything was going to be under control. There wouldn't be any epidemic in Russia at all. But suddenly, when people came back from holidays in Italy and France in March, then there was this spike. So the last week of March, suddenly the president and also the mayor of Moscow, who's actually dealing with the whole COVID crisis in Russia, decided to, one day after the other, close the borders. The airports were closed. So I basically heard in the morning that would be the last day that I could possibly fly out. And initially I thought, there's no way I can do this. I don't know when I'm going to be able to come back. But then I have a son. He's all by himself. He also moved away from Indonesia, and he's sort of, all by himself here in Holland. And I felt like, as a mother, my mother heart was speaking. I couldn't leave him alone. So I jumped basically at the last flight out of Moscow, not knowing when to get back. So I have done stories about what's going on in Russia at the moment from Amsterdam, because I still have a team in Moscow, a Russian team, who are gathering information and doing interviews and stuff like that. We have done investigations into the healthcare situation in Russia, because that was definitely a huge issue and is still a huge issue. So I sort of have been managing to do my work. But of course, now we're hoping that, especially now Sergei says, things are turning to normal, which is good news. I hope the borders will open as soon as possible.
So do you also see, because so Sergei explained a little bit about people staying at home as much as possible. But as in many countries, also the Netherlands, not everybody has the choice to stay home, also because they're in a vital profession, or because what you also see is that the inequalities that already exist in a country, they are very much shown at this moment. Is that also the case in Moscow? And can you tell a little bit about that?
Well, in general, I can say that the lockdown that we have here in Holland is a luxury compared to what's going on in Russia. I mean, people here are complaining about a lockdown, but it's definitely not a lockdown. Everyone is on the street. Everyone can go to the shops, go around. In Moscow, there's a much stricter regime. People, as Sergei says, have to apply for a digital pass when they want to wander around further than 100 meters from their house. And there are sanctions. I mean, people are being watched. You know, Moscow has a very extensive face recognition system. I did a story about it. It's one of the biggest in the world, and it's a project the mayor is very keen on. So this is a time that this face recognition system can be used, of course, to watch people violating the corona measures. So they can basically see in the cameras spread around the city, also attached to every door of every apartment, they can see when people are violating quarantines or not having passes when they should have them, and they know exactly who these people are.
And I'm also wondering, because in the Netherlands we saw at the beginning when the first cases came here that the government was actually quite relaxed, and we had the carnival here, which is a big thing in the Netherlands, and people were kissing everywhere and stuff like that. So we had a major spread, just as
that was not the smartest thing to do.
No, and then and also information wasn't really like, everything was slow, and there were not a lot of worries. And only now maybe there's more questions about why the reaction was quite slow. How did it go in Russia? Was it the same, or?
Well, in Russia, as Sergei said, initially didn't seem that bad because Russia immediately closed the border with China, where the threat was coming from initially. So it seemed that everything was under control until it wasn't. And then I think for the first few weeks when the spike was getting worse, the government still tried to pretend that everything was under control, and that was also the messaging that was coming from Kremlin and from the ministries. But then they had no choice. Then the mayor suddenly told President Putin, "This is out of control. There's many more cases than we know right now, and we have to do something." And that's when they took it very, very seriously. And as you asked about the difference in how people go about it, when I was on my plane out of Moscow, I think a lot of rich Russians were on my plane as well, trying to leave the country because a lot of people are worried and were worried about the healthcare system. And what we've seen in the last couple of months as well is that there are many business people, rich people have been flying back and forth in their private planes from Russia to Europe, to countries where they have possibly a second home. So there is a divide, of course, between people who have no choice but to stay at home, maybe no work, because initially the president said nobody can go to work, but they will still be paid. But there was no solution to how these people were going to be paid, because the companies, of course, had to pay while they had no income. So I'm sure a lot of people have lost their income, and they don't know when they're going to be able to get that income back. And the migrant workers were supposed to still continue to work, but many of them also were in limbo. So they were stuck in Moscow at many airports. They wanted to leave, but they couldn't. So it was a very divided situation between, the have and the have-nots, I would say.
So, and Sergei, I'm also curious, is there a big difference between the situation in Moscow and other parts of Russia?
To be honest, I cannot say for sure, because I am also locked in Moscow. I have a digital pass. I can go out on the streets, and that's what I was doing. But I did only one travel to St. Petersburg. I intend to do more, but I've been busy with Moscow. What I see from local news reports, that the health system is more or less okay in Moscow, but the healthcare workers in other cities report a lot about the insufficient of protective equipment and lack of payments, and this kind of problems with the system that we usually we got used to, to be honest.
So, and you just say because you have the digital pass for your work, you go outside, because you're working on a very interesting special project right now. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to. So I call this project The Great Emptiness, and it's a series of ultra-wide panoramic photographs of Moscow streets during the coronavirus lockdown. I realized that it's a unique opportunity for a photographer to document the empty streets of Moscow as it was never seen before, without people and car traffic. A town without citizens. It's a story about the city where buildings become the main characters. Usually, we don't notice the variety of shapes and styles and the unique beauty of our city. In these photographs, you can feel the dialogue between centuries, as the Baroque and Empire styles sit right next to constructivism or socialist classicism. I decided to run these photographs in black and white to emphasize the integrity of these architectural styles. Of course, you can see some strangers and cars, but they are incidental to the landscape. And I think even right now, I realize that it was just a glimpse. People are back in the streets. And these photographs are now documents of a historical moment.
Yeah, it's very impressive to see the streets so empty. And in sense, it was maybe only for maybe 2 or 3 weeks that it was so empty.
It was about less than a month, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a moment when I saw only food couriers and policemen on the streets.
That's unbelievable. It was the same here also, but you also see, but also our lockdown was a little bit more...
It's never been like this.
No. You could always see a few people, walking around or or some cars driving.
But do you miss it now if you see this emptiness? Was it something special?
It was a special moment, and I felt myself very special and privileged to attend this and to see that with my own eyes,
I can totally imagine.
Yeah, I'm also wondering because as what Step already also explained, and you explained, Sergey, that there are, of course, as in many cities, there are big divides also in wealth and what people can do during a lockdown. Sergey, do you also see that there's more solidarity or more social projects for people that they help each other?
I worked on several stories during this period, and one of them was the volunteers who helped migrant workers or daily labor workers who lost their jobs, and the embassies and charity funds. They were collecting a lot of donations and delivering food to those who could not go out because they didn't have a proper digital pass and they lost their money. And there was a lot of institutional and communal help from a lot of people. I was surprised to see that scale of support.
I see you nodding, Step. Is that also what you heard?
Yeah, volunteers who were helping migrants who were stuck and had no income, but also volunteers who were helping doctors and nurses in hospitals, just people who had no medical background whatsoever, who signed up to help in the overcrowded hospitals, not doing any medical treatments, but they were there to help carry patients or doing all that kind of logistical stuff. And there were hundreds of them. So that was also pretty amazing. You wouldn't expect that to happen here in Holland. That was very, very striking to me to see that.
So for now, I would like to thank you very much, both Sergey and Step. We will see you back later in the program. It's time to go to other very interesting artists or photographers that have very interesting projects in this time. I will talk with Maria Ionova-Gribina. She's a photographer who lost several jobs because of the corona crisis. And she felt an urge to document the lives of people who got affected by corona in a very special way. We will hear a little bit from Maria, but also from her friend Asha Zetvina, because there's a language barrier between us and Maria a little bit. Also joining us is Katerina Brudnaya. She had a very interesting Facebook initiative where we will speak with her about just in a bit, but we will start with Maria. So, Maria, I practiced this, but it's going to be long. Dobro pozalovat.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry, my English is very bad. So my friend will tell you about my project. Her name is Asha.
Thank you very much for being here, Maria, and that we can see you and also hear a little bit from you. But Asha is going to tell a little bit about your project. So, Asha, could you tell us a little bit why Maria started this project and what is it about? Also, welcome, Asha.
Sure. Really nice to meet you. So Maria's project is about the personal stories of people whose life has been changed because of the pandemic. And once Maria decided to tell about their experience, just posting their pictures on her Facebook and illustrating their stories with the portraits that she made at her home, also sitting isolated by their FaceTime and Skype. And also it had happened because in Russia, some people, they actually did not believe in coronavirus. And well, there are lots of stories behind it. And that's how this story actually happened.
I think we're going to look at some of Maria's work. There, and maybe you can see it as well. Can you maybe tell a little bit about it? I see a very pregnant belly.
Yeah. So this is Anastasia, and she's from Moscow. And Maria took one of the picture one day before the birth, and so she was shooting Nastya portrait, and then she said, I think I'm going to go to labor. And the next morning she called Maria and said to her that she was actually gonna give a birth in a hospital, and of course, well, several hours afterward, after the delivery, Maria took few pictures of her. And at that very moment, she was talking with her husband via WhatsApp because it was not allowed, because her husband was not allowed to stay with her. Yeah.
Do we have another one? There, yeah.
Yeah, and that's Anna. She's a GP, also from Moscow. Wow. And Anna is working at the COVID hospital, and her shift is around 8 hours or even more, with no breaks actually. And she has to wear a protective suit and during her whole shift. And then Anna began having a strong allergy caused by the chemical treatment for protective masks. And that is why she had this spots on her face, unfortunately.
Wow. Very impressive picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's Ludmila, and she's 39 years old. She's also an artist living in Moscow. And Luda, she's at the country house with her 4 kids. And she said that she struggles with her concentration on her work as children are together at home, constantly needing to be fed, entertained, and yeah, that is why she cannot concentrate on her work.
That's very recognizable. I had the same with only 2 children, and I can also imagine that that's difficult as an artist. But maybe we can talk about that a little bit later, because I see another very impressive picture. Can you see it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's Denis, and he's 32 years old, also from Moscow, Russia. And that's a friend of Maria, and he's actually a DJ. But at some point, he decided to sign up as a voluntary in one of the departments of Moscow hospital, specializing on a COVID treatment. And now he works for 24 hours and rest for 48 hours. And in one day, he has 3 exits to the red zone for 4 hours with breaks for 4 hours. Mm-hmm. And he gets so exhausted that during the 24 hours of rest, he sleeps. And for the other 24 hours, he parties online with his friends.
Yeah. Wow. And this one?
And this one is Leonid. And he's only 10 years old. Also, he's living in Moscow. And in 2 days, Leonid is turning 11. And he's gonna celebrate his birthday via WhatsApp with his family and friends. Also, he has been swimming professionally since he was 5 years old. And before the quarantine, he had practices 6 times a week after school. The swimming pool, unfortunately, shut down in late March. And nowadays, Leonid trains at home every day. His training routine usually consists of morning jog around the house, physical exercises, and stretching. Each morning, he receives new tasks from his trainer. And Leonid invented swimming on his skateboard. And Maria ended up this shooting because Leonid told to her, like, I want to swim. With these words, Leonid, just went back to his practice.
Very, very impressive pictures. Very cool. Photo. Yeah. So I think you discussed this question also with Maria. So what I said about, it's sometimes difficult to concentrate in the lady who had 4 children at home. I had the same with 2, especially if you are in an artistic process, if you are really focused on something, you get in and out of focus all the time. So we were wondering how this was for Maria, if it was different focusing and making, doing her work, this beautiful work during the crisis.
Yeah, so basically, while I was talking with Maria explained to me that, well, basically she's an artist 24/7. And of course, her work mainly based in a medium of photography, but also installation and performance. And she earning money for her living with assignments for media. And there was a problem because basically most of her assignments were canceled. And that is why she just started to find some other jobs and trying to find the best solution how to take pictures in this kind of situation, isolated situation, I would say. But also, for sure, she already knew about this method of taking pictures in a distance, but she'd never tried it. And but basically, COVID-19 just forced her to try this methodology, and I think it went quite great.
Yes, I would definitely say that. So, Asha and Maria, thank you so much for joining us and Maria showcasing your work. It's very impressive. then it's time to go to Katerina, who had a very interesting initiative called Izo-Izo-Lyasha. I'm sorry if I mispronounce it. Very interesting about people reenacting famous paintings with stuff at home. So while we are talking, we will see examples of it. So could you tell us a little bit more about your project?
Yes, of course. Hello, everybody. So my name is Katerina. I live in Moscow and work in Russian IT company. And just yesterday, we got to know that we could return to our office in September.
Oh.
Yes, it's September.
Wow.
Yes, it's 1st of September. Yes, okay. Everybody was shocked. So our isolation is continuing. So it's my and my friend's COVID child, as I said. It's our Facebook group, a place where anybody can create their own unusual interpretations of famous works of art. It started just a local flash mob for my friends. I decided to cosplay Van Gogh's painting and use my husband as a model. We colored his beard with the orange color and found and found a hat. So I made a photo by phone very, very quickly, not special, and just for fun, just to do something new, but not only reading the Kavin News all time, because I feel very difficult myself. It was a difficult time for our family, and at that moment we were at home near 2 or 3 weeks. So I posted it to Facebook and invited my friends to join. So they did, and they did fantastic works. And in 2 days, when the works did they and then they friends and the friends of their friends, so we got so many words, very simple but with humor. We decided to make a group to collect them all into one place. So we made the Facebook group, and then people came to the group. 20,000 people, 100,000 people. In a little over a month, the group has gained more than 500,000 members and near 40,000 amazing submissions. So together we help each other to stay positive in isolation. Isolation has been people's way to escape to creativity, and it's an activity to the whole family. So one woman, she's a photographer, yes, but she stays in isolation with her 90-year-old mom, and her mom became her only model. So together they make fantastic copies of Asian statues. And for example, we have a mom of 4 children, and she had many variations what picture to choose. When the group grown, we gained around us a volunteer group. Now there are 14 moderators, and we work around the clock 7 days a week. So the project, and 2 girls from our group are living in USA and 1 in New Zealand. So they help us to support Izo-Izo-Lyasha when it's night in Moscow. Yes, it's not easy. We all have main job and our families. But we realize how important is our mission to support the group is give smiles and art to the people all over the world.
It's amazing.
Yeah, you
really well done.
Yeah, you definitely succeeded in that. So I am curious, just one question, because I actually also saw the Getty Museum in Los Angeles was also doing a similar thing, but not as good as you are doing it. So is it people from all over the world, or is it predominantly Russia?
No, main people is in Russia, but of course, but now to our group came people to different countries, from USA, from Italy, from all countries, I think.
Thank you so much for telling about this initiative. And on the Pakhuis de Zwijger website, people can find the Facebook page, and I would definitely invite them to have a look, because it's so funny, and it's what you are saying. It gives you a smile, and that's something you really need now and then in this strange period. Thank you, Maria, Asha, and Katerina for joining us. So, Steph, you were also laughing when you saw these pictures, but what do you think of these projects?
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. I saw this last project also in a Dutch newspaper, in the Volkskrant. They had a whole story about it. And it just shows how creative people are, and I think it's amazingly inspiring. Of course, all over the world, you have seen also on social media people doing all kinds of art during this lockdown period. But what I've seen coming from Russia has completely blown me away, because it's not only photos or these art pieces, but a lot of people have composed songs, the most funny hip hop songs about quarantine time. I mean, they're really, really good. So I'm very impressed.
Yeah, because what I said, so you have also the Getty Museum, for example. I mean, these are also nice and funny, but this is really taking it to the next level.
Another level, definitely.
The level of details. I'm curious though, because you are also, as a journalist, you're also a little bit of a storyteller. Do you see big differences between the countries you have worked in the way of storytelling?
Well, I think the way Russia tells their stories is very cultural. Culture is an art, of course, is a very important factor in Russia. So, and the history of the country is very important. So it's all melted together. If you are telling a story, it's not just superficial, it's deep. Russia is very deep, I have to say. Yeah, different than Asia. In a way, in Asia is more light and quick, and Russia is slow and deep, if I can compare it that way.
Okay, that sounds familiar, because the Greek have a way of that as well. Also, on their long history is very important.
Yeah.
So we are coming to the final part of our program. And as you were so beautifully saying, Step, arts are very important in this time also. We really can see that. So we are going to talk with 3 very impressive guests that took the time to join us today to talk about the impact of the pandemic on the arts and cultural sector. These are Anton Bilov, the director of the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art, Elena Tubiezeva, the director of Ballet Moscow, and Anastasia Uspenskaya, the manager of the extracurricular project Marchi from the Moscow Architecture Institute. Welcome all 3 of you. So nice of you guys to join us today. So first, I'm going to you, Elena, but we are going to watch a short video clip from a performance from your ballet.
А образ одинокой девушки с картины «В парке» Константина Коровина переосмыслит для нас в танце Камила Могилева.
Осень прозрачное утро, небо как будто в тумане, вдали станов перламутра, солнце холодное тайное. Где наша первая встреча, яркая, острая, тайная, тот летний памятный вечер, милая, словно случайная. Не уходи.
Very nice. So, I also have a question coming in from the audience. As I understand, this piece has been made for a museum night?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Could you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Before talking about museum night, I want to say that our dancers and pedagogues, all of our theater stopped to work and be in rehearse in the middle of March, immediately when we heard that the coronavirus cases are growing. So the dancers performing in the museum night almost after 2 months not performing at all. So this project we prepared with the Russian Museum, with the Museum of Russian Impressionism, and it was in the museum night, and all the dancers, they had to rehearse at home. And our choreographer, Artyom Ignatiev, he had to rehearse online with them. Wow. And each dancer picked up a certain picture, painting, and it was like a 2 to 3 minute solo. So there were 5 solos and it was streamed online during the museum night.
Ah, okay, wow.
Yeah.
That's a very different way of working, I imagine.
Yes, very different, different, and it was very difficult also to rehearse on your own, because performing arts and dance is a very group work, and we get used to a physical concept, which is very important for us. And after 2 months being in isolation, it's very difficult to perform, but also it's physically difficult to perform. And our dancers confessed to us after this project that even performing 2-3 minutes, it already physically was not very easy.
Yeah, because I know, especially of ballet dancers, it's like doing like sports on the highest level. How did they keep into shape during this period?
Yeah, I know actually in Holland, for example, dancers are now equal to athletes in the way. So yes, we are part of dancers, ballet dancers and contemporary dancers. They have to train every day, and normally their week is 6 times a week. They rehearse and they train. So since the lockdown, we've been giving online classes every day to our dancers. They do different disciplines, not only ballet, but also Pilates, cardio training, contemporary dance training. So for 2 months at home, every day in the morning, they see each other online, and our pedagogues that are our staff members, and also we have a lot of international guest teachers who give actually for free classes, which is also very important. So we will continue next 3 weeks doing that.
So and in general, so this is this is a very clear effect, of course, of making ballet or rehearsing for ballet during the crisis. But can you also tell in general a little bit about what the effect has been on the Moscow Ballet?
Of course, we have to, first of all, we don't have any income since March, so we had to stop to perform. We are a state company, we belong to the city of Moscow, we have subsidy from Moscow, which helps us to keep the salary of, we have 65 employees, technicians, office management, and dancers and pedagogues. But we stopped performing, so we don't have our own income. And from the income, normally we create new performances, new projects, and etc. So we had to rethink the whole half of the season, and so we have to move some projects to the next year. I think we will. I hope we will be allowed to start rehearsals in August. At least that the dancers will get into shape slowly and start to perform at the end of September, beginning of October. And unfortunately, for example, we have one project with a Dutch artist, Dutch choreographer Wopke Koendersma. The project was the new performance was supposed to happen in September, so it will be moved to 2021.
Okay. So, Anton, you are the director of the Garage Museum. Can you tell a little bit about this museum and also tell us a bit about how the pandemic is affecting your museum?
So, Garage Museum of Contemporary Art is like, I don't know, one of the coolest and museum in the world, and I really think so, because this place is concentrated on the person who is coming to this museum and your experience. Near museum and side museum, it's really beautiful, made this building by OMA Run Kolkhoz, and it's actually a small campus inside the Gorky Park, the central park of the Moscow. And of course, we were like the first museum in Russia who was closed. We decided to close on 14th of March. And so it was quite difficult for us because we have now amazing exhibitions, but still we decided to do this because we saw how it's going on like in many countries in Europe, and it was very like difficult but strong decision by the team. Of course, we're like losing money every day because there are no incomes from like tickets, membership cards, and of course we're like losing money from events because actually we already should be open the summer cinema and many other activities like concerts and all the stuff, but still like for us maybe it's a little bit easier because we have very strong founders who supporting us in our like patrons and partners. They didn't stop any programs of supporting of us. We even received like 4 more new partners during the like this crisis, which is really nice. And actually we were like very happy that we can do some programs more during this period. So we opened the project of self-isolation. And actually we decided with the founders that our cafe will be working like a center for the food. So we're providing food like to 800 doctors and volunteers across the Moscow hospitals, and we're giving 400 boxes to the migrants and like families with a lot of like children who like in a very difficult now situation economically.
Oh, that's a very beautiful way to redirect your work at this very strange time. I was also wondering, because so you are of course the director of the museum and Elena is from the Ballet Moscow, but of course could you tell us a little bit about how this pandemic is for independent artists like photographers or other artists that are working now? Are there like, for example, aid packages for them?
We support like even artists. We give them like some support. We actually made a huge project now, which called Reflection. So we invite independent writers, philosophers, theorists, make like essay, article, something about this period of time, like to freeze this moment and give them some money to support the like month of their lives. And we're inviting artists, performers, photographers to do like commentating works for these texts. And so we're trying to support. And of course, we like some artists, they really don't have like money for food. So we're providing even food for the artists during this time.
Okay. So, and Anastasia, also very welcome to the conversation. Could you explain us a little bit about the Marchi Project?
Hello, I'm from Moscow Architecture Institute, and I can tell a little bit about how educational system in Russia reacted to this crisis. I think the education all over the world is the part of society that hit maybe the hardest this crisis, because definitely we were very poor prepared for such a quick change. But our government system surprisingly worked very fast in educational part, because we had like in one day we were switched to distant education, and in second week we already had some programs and some like tools to support educational system all over the country. And we kept salaries, and we kept everything about our payment, at least in our university. So we are the fortunate ones in economic part. But it is very, very hard for us, for architecture students and students of art, to switch to the distant format, because the same as Yelena's people, we need to be in contact, and we usually work and see each other, and we see hand of our master or tutor that drawing some sketches with us, and we usually have some face-to-face contact. So this is the hard part, and also digitalizing all programs in like 2 weeks. It was just crazy job for us and for every university, I think, in Russia, except maybe like few of them who were already in progress. But this crisis gave us lots of brilliant opportunities, and one of that I like the most, that students stepped up and they took a little bit of charge of what's going on and what's going on in social media of university. And one of our young teachers, young tutors and students, they created very interesting workshops and programs where students present themselves for a big audience, what they do, they research, because usually we don't have time to look at every research that we do in university. And now we have like thousands of watches the online Zoom conferences and then videos. So the effect of each discipline and each program that we put online, it's like it's grow very much. And students decided that they want to spend this few months in creative, very creative way. So they made online workshop where they collect students from all over the country, architects from all over the country. It was, I think, 150 students from 30 different universities. And they worked together in a Miro program. And they had like a huge board that they work on for 2 days. And it was like a movie to see how they work, because it was empty in the first day. And then every hour it just grow and grow and grow. And you could see that like one team do something here, another doing this corner. So it's very beautiful. And so I really like about this period that students now are more in charge and more giving and more exchanging what they do. And I think this is the good part.
And as I also understood is that there's also the pandemic has also changed the thoughts about architecture as a whole, also where the focus is in Moscow itself. Can you tell a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, we had a few conversations with students and with architects like Cosmos Architecture Bureau and other bureaus from Moscow and from other countries. And we keep coming back to this idea that everything that we've been working on for last 20 years or maybe even more, architecture usually the most likable and most popular pieces of architecture, it's a public buildings, and now they are empty, and now they are a little bit they're forbidden to go into, and they are staying like a museum exponent, so you can see them but you can't touch them. And it's interesting how what we did in 20 years now we don't need it in this period of our time, and how we are much more focused in our houses or our surrounding and around our apartments or the place that we live, and how this focus for architects had a little bit to switch. So from public spaces and the building like the ending point to the way how people live and how they spend their time from home to where they go, or how they live in their houses, or how their houses look, or maybe how hospitals function and what are they, because these now are more important than the public spaces that we used to put much more work in. And the other part is the digital space and how architects live in them, because for example, we now could be not in Zoom seeing each other, but be in a virtual space where we could see each other, where we could physically see each other, and we can see each other in different chairs or in different backgrounds. So architects are really now focusing on these kind of things. So even it's very affordable and it's very easy to bring to people, and you don't need construction for like few years before you have pretty VR created space.
That's very interesting. That also brings me to my final questions for you guys. So we can very much see the added value also of this crisis to architecture. It changes the way people are thinking. And Elena, to start with you, what would you say is the added value of arts in this time? How can arts help us through these strange times?
I think there are many ways, but I think our main goal was to be positive and find new ways to communicate, first of all, between the team, but also with our audience, that we are not physically, we cannot perform in a physical space, but we can perform virtually. So I think it gives us a lot of, for the future, how we can use the physical space in a better way than we used before. So I think the topic of the space, physical space and digital space, again, is very big for us now, I think.
Okay. And Anton?
I really think it's a very strange moment when it's a combination of physical help, which you really need to do, and to be volunteers and supporters and give some money or help with the projects which stopped for the many artists. But at the same time, it's a lot of these psychological things, because we always concentrate on this, statistic, bad news, how many people died, how many people going better. And I think the role of the arts sometimes is really help to the person to be the person interesting in something else, more than statistic and more than just pandemic expectations when it will be finished, but to be the same, the person who after, at the end will go to the theater, will go to the museum, enjoy the life, cocktail on the terrace, and will be the same, and hugging and kissing each other.
Thank you very much for this positive note as well, Anton. Elena, Anton, and Anastasia, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your very insightful experiences. It's time to wrap up, and I'm going to do this with Sergei, who was so kind as to stay with us. It has become a sort of a small tradition to go back to one of our first guests in the program and to ask this person to give sort of a final thought. So that would be my question to Sergei. Thank you for staying with us. What would you like to give the viewers, as the audience, as a sort of take-home message after everything you've heard and shared with us?
Well, I would say it's short, but I saw a bumper sticker of one of the doctors at the Kommunarka hospital, which was one of the top frontline hospitals fighting with the virus. And the sticker said that we will hug each other once it's over.
Oh. That's very sweet. Thank you very much for sharing that. And also all esteemed guests, also Step Vase joining me here in Pakhuis de Zwijger, and all the guests zooming in from Moscow and bearing with me in shattering your names. I did my best, but thank you for your patience with that and for your digital presence and taking the time for being with us. And also, of course, many thanks to Pakhuis de Zwijger and DutchCulture for bringing about these series. And of course, to our audience watching. You can watch back the last editions on New York City, Jakarta and Cairo, or rewatch this edition on Moscow at the Pakhuis de Zwijger website or on YouTube. And also good to know is that DutchCulture will write an article about each individual program on their website. So we will meet again next Thursday, and we will talk more about the current situation in Sao Paulo. Have a nice evening and stay healthy, and we will be able to hug each other soon.
Hopefully.
Inshallah.